Good evening, everybody. System Chalk here with the 148th episode of our first YouTube run through the House of Light expansion to Book of Hours, playing as the Archaeologist. This is feeling like an introduction I make at the very start of every Monday episode, but I'm busy again. So the plan, it's going to be a little different this time around. So my plan here is going to be, I'm going to record Monday's episode now. I'm going to do the things that I need to do today, and then I'm going to come back, and whatever time I have left, I'll use to record more House of Light episodes. On Tuesday, I'll have sort of some free time then. I'll see what I can do in terms of clearing out the rest, but the risk for this, as always, is that I may not be able to do the full series of 4, and this is really the one opportunity I get to communicate that possibility. And I'm going to be trying to work on more consistency in terms of the videos. I haven't been missing as many, but it is just a drawback that, I spend the first minute of every 4th episode talking about how difficult it is to get things done. So, I noticed that when I put down some notes for the day, I have Drums and Dances and Applebright Euphonies, and then Barber to 15 Moth, but I believe that's all old news. So the tricky part here is finding out what I had planned. Clearly we've got a Sacralamea. I wish I remembered what I was trying to push up here, because clearly the Resurgences and Emergences is being used to push Entradis Mahira's up to 9. Was it Sights and Sensations, maybe? The fact that I'm doing I'm Glimmerings, the one with the bittersweet certainty, suggests to me that that's probably where I'm going. Yeah, I'm going to make a guess here and say that I was going for... I think I wanted to put this one in the top spot of Hushery, and we'll move on. So anyways, I realize it's a weird problem for people who are watching videos, because of course I will have just made the choices, and it's not clear that I've had a week between recording. But I think we're ready to go. There was also a plan of some cooking. Oh, that's nice. He does a lot with silence, this man. So this will also go into Sights and Sensations when the time comes. So yeah, there was a question about getting cooking done. And I suppose now is maybe now is the time for me to work that out. I'm trying to think what else I would be doing with the 4 remaining elements of the soul. I have everything but the shaft can be used to cook something. So really, I guess it's 1 in each slot. That doesn't quite work though, because the metal can go into this cooking station, but the Faust and the Whist are both required for the jail. But you know what? Let's take a minute here and decide who we want to invite in. So our last salon had Douglas, Arthur, Serena, Wakefield, and Eason. Now I don't necessarily mind having those individuals, but I'd also like a little bit of variety if I can get to it. So I guess we haven't had Peter Igdistis. Well, then again, I mean, it does sort of depend which guests I invite based on their what likely challenges are going to be coming up. But maybe we don't need as many elements or as many skills and lessons as we previously did. So let's try and go for some figures we don't normally see. So I'm thinking Peter Igdistis would be someone we don't often see. So now this one, I feel like I always get his requirements wrong. It's Sky to bring him in, but he wants Heart for food. I'm trying to remember if we brought in Lalachaima, but let's bring her in. Maybe Corso. I haven't brought coquille in. I think this may wind up being a bit of a challenging one for me to work through. But that's fine. It gives me something to do. And I guess we can do Corso, although again, that's very Grail heavy. So if we have Peter, Lala, Coquille, and Corso, who is the fifth? So if I want sort of the disreputable, Daymare would be the obvious choice here. But if I want to balance it out, somebody like Schaller or Serena might make it interesting. I think I'll make Stanislav. And he is Heart as well. So that gives me, basically this is a little bit about how do I, what guests do I want, and so what's going to constrain the various dishes that I can make. Now, I think probably onion soup would be a good place to start. That is going to take up my consider verb, which is unfortunate, but maybe I can do that in 17. I guess, yeah. I don't think I have I don't think I have onions right now, but I'll get those. So if I do onion soup, Grail I'm going to have more options for, but I'm actually going to take a second here to bring up my recipe list. It'd be particularly nice if I can just change it up in terms of the like I always wind up making the the cookies, the orange jumble, but I feel we can do a little bit better than that. So I think pheasant in a few cases gives us Grail. Onion rings is also an option. I haven't done onion rings, although they're a little tougher to make compared to some of the other ones. Magnificent roast, but actually, you know what? What if I did magnificent roast potatoes and some kind of pheasant? Or what I can do, I'm going to need more dripping if that's the case. So I think I already have some. Yeah, so I've got one dripping here, but we would probably need two. So maybe what I would do is I would take the beef. So instead of doing pheasant, we can cook the beef, make sure it gets Grail, and then we can use the dripping for the magnificent roast potatoes. All right, I think we're getting somewhere here. Let me just double check that I'm getting this. Yeah, so the marinated roast beef. So the last question's Heart. Now, Heart is kind of the easy mode in terms of the food. So one thing I do need to keep in mind is we still need a pudding. So when it comes to pudding, a lot of hard options. So I'm looking at my list here. So we've got orange jumble, apple pie, pear pie, knot cake, Madeira cake, apple charlotta, plum croutons, blackberry jam sponge cake, toffee pudding, honey haunted amber pumpkin pie, Cornish honey cake, and rosehip jam sponge cake. We have quite a few pairs, so I think maybe we'll make the dough. And then the last of it is just a question in terms of any old heart that I want. Again, it might be nice to try and have something on theme, something that Stanislav might like, but I'm a little bit easier when it comes to like when it comes to some sort of heart food. Ideally, it will be something that I can make without. Actually, you know what? Vegetable stew. It's not the most exciting, but okay. So if I'm going to be making the pear pie, I think this would mean the dough is the first thing. So let's. I think I'll use the whisk here. As much as I want to play with my new toy, let's wait until we've committed a few things. Okay, so. And then we need butter or milk, so we've got the butter here. Okay, mixed dough, an ingredient for a higher purpose. I think we could marinate the beef. So I guess I am using the metal after all. Now I guess I need some sort of alcohol for that. I didn't really think too much about that. If I've got a spare Eigengrau kicking around, that's best, but I don't think I do. Schloss Jannings and Lambig are both pretty empty. Yeah, so let's take a look. The Schloss Jannings has more more edge to it. Marinate a joint of beef, an ingredient for a higher purpose. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with where we're at for the salon. I think at this point we kind of just need to wait for all of the... I think we kind of need to wait for everything to play out. At that point I will, I'll try and use the Shapt and the Faust. But I think probably at this point getting Sights and Sensations to level 9 is the top priority. As I used to say in my youth, the day is done and so am I, but I've earned my pay. Now, one thing I'm going to try to do to give myself a little more mileage for cooking, I'm going to bring back the Arab in this case. Now, if I wanted, I could do something like a core, which, actually, you know what? Yeah, core is slightly safer because I do get the option of, using it for the sweet bones again. But the idea here is that this is something that I can use at the cooking station that I currently don't have access to, and I can get another dish if I need. So tuppence will buy me a hearty meal and a quiet place where I can rest and gather my thoughts. And so the idea here is that every once in a while I'll do this, but I like to think that as I sort of use the Shapt as a default, I'm not necessarily throwing that off because I still have the surplus of Shapt, right? I'm basically trading this Shapt for something that I can use in a cooking station to maximize the use of the elements of the soul over the course of the day. Might be unnecessary, but it doesn't hurt to be to try and position myself for the last minutes of the day. All right, Glimmerings, one will want to pay attention to. An anonymous prison diary written by a dreamer convicted of oniric irresponsibility and confined to the cucurbit. The prisoner is plainly terrified and bewildered by their situation and has been unable to wrangle a coherent explanation out of anyone, but the dreams keep coming and they keep writing them down. Snow, broken mirrors, half-heard sky music, flowers of white, red, and black, a blood-streaked winter dawn, the most notorious signifiers of oniric risk, fantastically vivid and detailed. No wonder they were locked up. Their final recorded dream is of a worm jewel beneath Brandkrug Isle, which they open with a key carved from their fingerbone. The Kukurbit Prisoner Records, 1928, accounts by Governor Collar's private secretary of interventions and experiments in the last years of the Kukurbit prison, focusing particularly on the hill children, wild wood things that have found a shape in the physical world. Something called a Singlefoot, a horned mountain dweller, is brought back from some kind of embassy to the Grove of Green Immortals. Collars expresses his irritation that Gervinus Van Loren refuses to assist in its containment. The Singlefoot somehow conjures an earthquake that cracks the tower and enables its escape. Collars determines that it should not have been permitted to dream while kept beneath the earth. It had access to sufficient scale aspect to use its arts of hill and hollow to develop an old moment into an earthquake name. He mandates above-ground confinement for all hill children prisoners in the future. So for those of you who are interested in lore, we've seen Singlefoots before, right? It looks like we'll be reading Singlefoot songs, actually. And of course, we know about the kind of the... we've seen the damage to the tower. And it probably isn't all that surprising to see sort of scale associated with the earth. Again, we've got miners for that. And we've also got... I'm trying to remember. It's so much easier when I have the earth sign, but... what is hard without, hard within, hard to rouse, harder to subdue? What is left of the crude powers of the deep earth? So all of these sort of line up, but these are a few cases where... oh, sorry, there was one other one. I feel like there was one other reference to Singlefoots. Anyways, it escapes me right now. But in this case here, you get what I think is slightly more interesting, and it's partly because of the way that, you know, Cultist Simulator and Book of Hours sort of do magic. And for those of you that like this sort of stuff, and if you've not listened to it, definitely check out these... it's the Weather Factory podcast, Skeleton Songs. They've had multiple episodes where they talk about different magic systems in different worlds, and I'm never going to do it justice to summarize it this way, but what I think some of the discussions can kind of do, they are all varying ways in which different systems have answered the question, if magic exists, you know, why doesn't the government just use it to achieve incredible power? You know, some of the histories may have something like that, right? But it's one of these things where, you know, it's cool to put magic inside of a setting, but sometimes to really sell it, you want this coherence. And, you know, in some cases, you'll have these very interesting and well-developed worlds that are the ones that we take a lot of time talking about. And other ones, you know, they're just some, you know, they're laser beams. You know, you put on the ears to be Spock, or you put on the ears to be an elf, and, you know, people like the same books. You know, the Weather Factory co-founders, Alexis Kennedy and Lottie Bevan, are incredibly intelligent and very well-read people. They're also, wonderful conversationalists, as you will see based off of that podcast. So I strongly recommend that you check it out. But for knowing that these developers are interested in that sort of stuff, knowing just sort of the fact that people quite like this world and ask questions in terms of things like the lore, one thing that I think is kind of important here is that what can be interesting in the game is not just lore in the sense that I have a mystery scale or a mastery scale, or, you know, there's some lantern or winter aspect here. Those are some labels that the game is attached. But I also think some of the interesting questions in terms of lore will be, you know, how does this stuff work in this world? How does it work when I do a certain thing in the game? You know, am I shooting lightning bolts out of my fingertips, or are coincidences just suddenly happening a lot more, you know, that are moving towards my favor? Both of those would be representations of magic in other game settings, but clearly those are two very different takes on magic. And so in this case here, when we have sort of, there are these things called Singlefoots, and the mere fact that they are housed deep below the earth gives them access to powers that allow them to create an earthquake, tells you a little bit about what's happening in the setting and how magic works. even if there isn't sort of the, okay, I'm going to, I'm going to put, you know, um, honey scarred jasmine, in a bowl or with the mortar and pestle, and apply my metal, and I'll get one fireball that I can use to an impolite guest during a salon. So I always think those are nice little details to follow up on, because those are things that don't have game mechanics to directly tell you to look at them. And yet, in terms of understanding the setting, right, I think people are interested about the occult in the secret history setting. I think that's a pretty fair assumption to make. And so that ultimately will address the question of, why are some people able to do this stuff and why are other people not? And, there's this description in terms of Cultist Simulator of the traits of people who have achieved their goals. They often say that they're wealthy, that they, hit a certain mark, and so on and so forth. And, this probably is describing your character at the end of a standard run of Cultist Simulator. But it's worth asking, why are these things important for the character? Because wealth on its own in Cultist Simulator doesn't actually get you very far. It stops you from losing, but it doesn't give you a win. Which I think is a very interesting perspective on money, obviously. All right, the Snare of the Tree, collected proverbs of Aunt Mopsy. Once in the wood we call a visit, twice in the wood we call a journey, thrice we call coming home. Every timber has its knots, the straight and crooked both. Every weave is more absence than thread. You can't keep nowhere out any more than you can keep somewhere in. When the cuckoo learns the nightingale's song, our sleep is sweeter than honey. Opening the Sky, an unusual recording of Varro's Opening the Sky, composed for the coronation of the new king, Henry IX. The record bears the suppression stamp Expunge. The first movement is soft, autumnal. The second, unsettling, febrile. The third is bright, soaring, rapturous. The fourth movement is glassy, slithering, a tintinnabulous icicle rattle. The fifth returns to the theme of the third, bright and rapturous once again, but this is a choral movement. It becomes apparent, though, that these are much, much too pure and high to be human voices. They recall birdsong, they recall the sweep of the windswept sky, blue turning black at the edge of the higher heaven, and they wrench the heart in a direction the Bureau does not permit. Singlefoot songs. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Huashan, near to the grove of the Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which he suggests causes harm only when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices, powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoot sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. I'll be humming this for a while, and so will anyone else who happens by. Okay, so first thing that I want to do here is to commit the whist. Oh, sorry, I've got 0.4 seconds still. The skill is now level 9. Its power aspects have also increased. So here I'm sort of securing the big win for today, but there's other things that we can do. So, sunny hindsight. This isn't so important at this point of the day, but what I'd like to do with these cases, if I can use weather, particularly for the level 9, like the thing that I know I'm going to need the maximum values for, weather's very helpful along these lines. So out of these remaining memories, sorry, I'm really struggling with the names for things today, but there's a little bit of a hierarchy for these. The biggest one is that hindsight can be generated by a conversation. None of these other ones can. Now, for my own part, I would probably want to prioritize, say, the confounding parable, and the bittersweet certainty first. Now that might seem a little funny here, but these are ones that I could generate through crafting. And for the same reason, that would be why a cheerful ditty is another good candidate. The Savage Hymn would also count under that. However, Savage Hymn requires drums and dances, and that's going to be one that I potentially want to use for other purposes. So I have basically, it's four memories, but 3 spots. So how would I divide the remaining ones? I'd probably do a Beguiling Melody next. Now, the reason why I'd be a little more hesitant for the Beguiling Melody was for the longest time we only had one book, and I'm a streamer, so if I can avoid reading the same book, even more, that's nice to do. And then, it's kind of an open question for the remaining ones. I may actually change this up a little bit just to make sure that the bed, which it's going to want me to close this, isn't it? All right. Yeah, so a rose will work. Okay, the Wistful Airs. That was the big one that I wanted to make sure, was that I could keep the Wistful Air. The Wistful Air, so far as I can tell, is something I can only make through crafting, and so is the, between the Salt and the Wistful Air, arguably the Wistful Air is the more difficult of the two to create, although it's kind of debatable. I have found that I need to put a little bit more in terms of generating that at the various instruments. And that's just because of, the various elements of the soul and skill combinations that I can pull off. Anyways, we don't need to dwell any longer on that. I just wanted to try and give a little bit of an overview in terms of why, that's kind of an unconscious process at this point here. I have a rough idea in terms of what memories I would want to apply. But if you're at a point where, you want to see just how much you can wring out of a day, or how many options you leave yourself open, doing things like saying I'm not going to tie up drums and dances in the closing half of the day because maybe I want to make a Hive's Lament, that sort of thing is, it's just a nice little advantage that you can get. And the funny thing is I don't perceive any benefit to the game of playing that way. I perceive the benefit as you learn more about the game when you do impose restrictions like that, and that's the real reason for doing it. I actually think if you're spending the time agonizing over the optimal build for Book of Hours for reasons other than understanding the game better, it's just a very sad way of playing, and I hope you can achieve more fun and other things. Sorry, that actually sounds rather mean. Obviously, people should play how they want, but it's just I know the type that will sometimes come in and be really, really stressed out about achieving a level of perfect play that I sometimes find at odds with the enjoyment of games, is what I'm trying to communicate with that. I definitely don't want to try and suggest other people are playing wrong. That is rather defeating the purpose. Okay, the skill is now level 9. Its power aspects have also increased. So let's make some onions, which is of course not exactly what's happening. We are all right, so we'll use the shaft for this. Identify as onions. These are onions. Wonderful. Unexpected finds in the folds of earth and sky. So we could have maybe tried to make the rosehip sponge cake, although I guess that would carry with it the risk that we run out of sugar. Okay, so we don't really need the sand, but we've got... Actually, you know what? I'll go on the bridge. This is nice cuckoo honey. The Blumberende were rogues and trickster heroes among the carapace kinds, ingenious, brave, prolific, untrustworthy. In Numa, their children might yet bring their gifts to ordinary hives. I'm wondering if maybe at some point Sorry, I cannot permit cuckoo honey to just sit on the bridge. We have some standards here. Well, one of these is going to wind up as storage, so... Oh. Another sack of vegetables, stew and waiting. And memory sound. Scraps from the Isle's Edge, which you know, maybe I would use that in something if we had the elements of the soul, but we're really just sitting on a Faust at this point. And then, of course, we should expect to have the core back as well, so I'm thinking we can probably get 2 more. All right. Basket of onions, the prima materia of cooking. This may be why the cosmos is shaped so like an onion. Just put them on the table for now. Not much we can do with the consider verb. We only have the fa, so we'll be able to get 2 more cooking tasks done. An ingredient for a higher purpose. Okay. It'd be nice if I could make the pear pie, but I want to make sure a few other tasks are taken care of. All right, marinated beef, uncooked, tangy, with the harbingers of a roastful destiny. Oh, but it didn't give me a dripping, which I was expecting. That was the whole reason why I did that. All right, well, that's a bit of a shame, but we'll that's not a deal breaker. We're still going to proceed with the cooking. Make onion soup, a dish with edge, heart, moon, and nectar. He does a lot with silence, this man. Now, the last thing that I wanted to say was we did read Glimmerings, and there was a hint in there, and I've kind of been building towards this hint for a while. So remember how it talked about, you know, an area beneath the isle. Well, there's a lot of different rooms here, but here we're going to take a look at the Rowanarium again. Once there was a brother and sister who loved each other greatly. They resolved that they were one soul split into 2 bodies, and their greatest wish was to become one. They found the hidden isle where the twins, the sister and witch, had arrived when they'd crossed the great ocean, and a sacred pool on which the moon shone only once a year. There they spoke with the twins in dreams, and they learnt how they might become conjoined as one flesh and immortal. Now the brother's resolution failed him, and though he loved his sister, he could not choose to spend eternity joined in one flesh. The sister could not persuade him, and she would not abandon him or force him. So they used their arts to live long lives, close but separate, and they made a double foundation of monks and nuns, as chaste as they had always been. But each nun had her brother twin, and none could enter alone. In time, the sister found her own immortality, and to this day she walks the world by moonlight. The brother died, and his bones are buried in the room beneath the well, but his children live on. Ruinarium. Rowena, the Legion, protectress of the house, holds the mayor's key of wormstone, which opens the door to nowhere. Now and then she has lent it unwisely, but only once has she lent it to Yeez. So, of course, this description here, we've read this before, but I'm pretty sure we have at least, but it's starting to get closer and closer to that description in terms of glimmering. And we did identify this earlier, but in terms of inputs to the Rowanarium, we've got the element of the soul, cooperative, remains, omen. These are usually what you'll find inside of an altar. But this one's a little unusual in the sense that, sure, there's the memory, the remains, and the pigment, but there's also the key. Reveal a treasure of the house. So I'm going to try, and I know we're at time, but I'm going to try and get a little bit more out of today just because we're in the closing minute. So I think what we can do here is we can take this core and turn it into another dish. Let's make the pear pie. Oh, wait a minute. No, marinating won't give me dripping. Sorry, I'm silly. Marinating won't give me the dripping. It's cooking the beef that will give me the dripping. I'm running ahead of things. All right. Still want to make the pie, though. So we should have tons of seedless pears. There we go. Bake a pear pie, a dish with forge, grail, heart, and nectar. So we'll take the minute to resolve everything. We'll take the wistful air overnight, remembering that our concern is that we may wind up in a pneuma. If that happens, then, you know, all bets are off in terms of the various persistent memories. We're kind of trying... There's a couple of things I could have done to position myself a little bit better for pneuma, in the sense that you know, there are some persistent memories that I could have hung on to and have generated, excuse me, I could have hung on to some more persistent memories, which would have given me more opportunities to level stuff up and over the course of pneuma, but we're generally pretty good in terms of what we need there. If we don't get pneuma, of course, we'll try and do the salon a little bit earlier than we have in the past. And I think this might be the first onion soup that we've made. It'll be fall. Where do I want to keep? I think we'll use the dining hall. It is very hard among the reflections of the Rowanarium to understand what exactly or who has just opened, but I can see very clearly what has just been revealed. Towards a fundamental aesthetic second edition, or the refinements of light, Julian Cosley had never wanted or expected to write a second edition of his masterwork. So, of course, teasing the secret of the house is one thing, but now we're at a point where we're teasing the contents of that book. I guess there wasn't any point in talking with Denzel. Okay. I think that's probably a good place to leave it. I'll let the Denzel timer run down, but notwithstanding the fact that I've got out-of-date notes, there's two big paths that we'll take over the course of the next day. So if it's pneuma, this is the opportunity for me to take a lot of these low-level skills that might wind up in the Tree of Wisdoms. I need to break something at level 5 for it, and then basically raise the floor in terms of my overall skill distribution. If, on the other hand, it's a normal day, then it's going to proceed a little bit like we had before. So where we're at right now is that the books in this room, this shelf, this shelf, this shelf, this shelf, this shelf, and these shelves, all of them have skills that we've already committed lessons for skills that we've already committed to the Tree of Wisdoms, and so I'm sort of treating them as free lessons. And so from that, right now I'm using those to take my highest level skills and bring them even higher, because I have the benefit of waiting a whole day to generate the required memories. Whereas pneuma is something much more time sensitive, and that's why I want to be using those low level skills and raising them up. And then at some point, I would like to try and get rid of the witch worms. That's going to involve a wormwood dream, but I'm not going to do that at the last day of spring. I might do that if I didn't have a better use for the wormwood dream, over the course of pneuma, let's say. But in this case here, I'll want to make sure that I have the free element of the soul and the edicts martial to be able to generate a wormwood dream. Usually I'll just take, some weather or something like that and produce a new one. It's not a hard one to make, but it does take 90 seconds, so it's something that I don't want to sort of just throw away. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Again, sorry for the uncertainty regarding future episodes, and I guess sorry for the longer episode today. But I hope to see you all Wednesday for future episodes. Until then, take care.